The stars looked different from the bridge of the New Horizon. Captain Lisa Martinez stood at the large window, watching the alien space station grow larger as they approached. Her hands were steady on the rail, but her heart was beating fast. This was the most important mission humanity had ever attempted. Behind her, the bridge crew worked quietly at their stations. They all knew what was at stake. For 3 months, they had traveled through deep space to reach this place. The Zephyrian Empire controlled 12 star systems and had the strongest fleet anyone had ever seen. Humanity needed peace with them, or their colonies would be destroyed. Ambassador Richard Hayes walked onto the bridge. He was a tall man with gray hair and kind eyes. He had spent 30 years making peace between different groups. If anyone could make this work, it was him. "How long until we dock?" he asked Captain Martinez. 20 minutes, sir," she replied. "The Zephyrians are guiding us to docking bay 7. Hayes nodded and looked out at the station. It was huge, made of crystal that seemed to glow with its own light. Strange shapes moved across its surface. The Zephyrians built things differently than humans did. Dr. Amanda Foster joined them at the window. She was Hayes's deputy and one of the smartest people on Earth. She had studied every piece of information about the Zephyrians for months. "Their station is bigger than our largest city," she said quietly. "The power readings are incredible. They could destroy our entire fleet without even trying hard." Hayes put his hand on her shoulder. "That's why we're here, Amanda. To make sure they never have to try." The door opened and Dr. Paul Wright hurried in. He was the team's expert on alien life forms. His hands were full of data pads and his hair looked messy from running. "I've been studying their biology reports," he said, breathing hard. "The Zephyrians are fascinating. They're like giant insects, but they think and feel like we do. Their society is built around strength and honor. They respect beings who can fight, but they also value clever thinking." Monica Stevens entered next. She handled all the trade talks and knew more about space commerce than anyone. She was young but very smart about business. "I've prepared our trade offers," she said. "We can give them rare metals from our mining worlds. They need these metals for their technology. In return, we want safe passage for our ships and protection for our colonies." The last member of their team was Commander Jake Sullivan. He was in charge of their security, but his job was also to show the Zephyrians that humans could fight if they had to. He was a big man with scars on his face from old battles. "The Zephyrians have agreed to let me keep my sidearm," Sullivan said. "That's actually a good sign. It shows they respect our right to defend ourselves." Hayes looked at his team. These were Earth's best people, and he was proud to work with them. "Remember, everyone, we're not just representing our governments today. We're speaking for every human who wants to live in peace. The Zephyrians think we're weak because we prefer talking to fighting. We need to show them that peaceful people can also be strong people." The New Horizon shook gently as it connected to the alien station. Captain Martinez checked her instruments. "Docking complete," she announced. "The station's atmosphere is safe for humans. Their artificial gravity is a bit heavier than Earth normal, but nothing we can't handle." Hayes straightened his formal diplomatic uniform. "All right, team. This is what we trained for. Stay calm, be respectful, but don't back down from what we need. Humanity's future depends on the next few days." The airlock opened with a soft hiss. The corridor beyond was beautiful but strange. The walls were made of the same glowing crystal as the outside of the station. Patterns of light moved through them like slow lightning. 3 Zephyrians waited for them. Hayes had seen pictures, but seeing them in person was different. They were tall, almost 8 feet high, with bodies covered in hard, shiny armor that looked like it grew from their skin. Their faces had large eyes with many parts like broken mirrors. When they moved, they made soft clicking sounds. The center Zephyrian stepped forward. A small device on its chest spoke in perfect English. "Welcome, humans. I am Subcommander Veltar. I will take you to your rooms and then to the meeting chamber. High Executor Zaxthor will see you in 2 hours." Hayes bowed slightly. "Thank you for this opportunity. We hope our talks will bring peace and friendship between our peoples." Veltar's head tilted to one side. "The High Executor will decide what our peoples will have. Follow me." They walked through corridors filled with alien art and technology. Other Zephyrians stopped to stare at them. Some made clicking sounds that might have been conversation. Others just watched with their strange eyes. Dr. Wright was taking notes on everything. "Fascinating," he whispered to Dr. Foster. "Look how they move. Their legs bend differently than ours. And did you see their hands? 4 fingers, but each finger has 3 joints. They must be incredibly precise with tools. Their rooms were comfortable but clearly designed for beings much larger than humans. The beds were too big and the walls had no windows. Sullivan checked every corner and found several devices that were probably listening to everything they said. "We're being watched," he told Hayes quietly. "That's normal for diplomatic visits, but these feel more like prison cells than guest rooms." Hayes wasn't worried yet. "They're being careful. That's understandable. We're strangers to them just like they're strangers to us." 2 hours later, Veltar returned to take them to the meeting chamber. The room was enormous, with a ceiling so high it disappeared in shadows. High Executor Zaxthor sat on a throne made of black crystal. He was bigger than the other Zephyrians, and his armor had gold patterns that seemed to move. "So," Zaxthor said, his voice coming through speakers around the room, "these are the humans who think they can bargain with the Zephyrian Empire." Hayes stepped forward. "High Executor, we come in peace. Our species has much to offer each other. We believe cooperation is better than conflict for everyone." Zaxthor leaned forward on his throne. His many-part eyes reflected light like broken glass. "Cooperation?" he said. "You speak like equals, but you are not. Your ships are few and weak. Your colonies are scattered and defenseless. You have nothing we cannot simply take." The room fell silent except for the soft humming of alien machines. Hayes felt his team tense behind him, but he kept his voice calm. "Strength isn't just about ships and weapons, High Executor. It's about the will to defend what you love. Humans may seem peaceful, but we protect our own." Zaxthor made a sound that might have been laughter. "We shall see, Ambassador. We shall see." The first day of talks went badly. High Executor Zaxthor demanded that humans leave 3 entire star systems. He wanted Earth to pay tribute every year and give up all their military ships. When Ambassador Hayes tried to discuss other options, the Zephyrians became angry. "You do not understand your position," Zaxthor said, his voice growing louder through the speakers. "You are weak insects asking for mercy from giants. We offer you survival. That should be enough." Dr. Foster spoke carefully. "High Executor, our species has survived many challenges. We adapt and overcome problems. Perhaps we could find a solution that benefits everyone." The alien ruler's eyes flashed with different colors. "You think you are clever, human female. But cleverness means nothing when you are crushed under our ships." That evening, back in their rooms, the human team tried to understand what was happening. Dr. Wright had been taking secret readings of the air around them with a small device hidden in his jacket. "Something's wrong," he told the others quietly. "The air in the station has chemicals I've never seen before. They're similar to what some insects use to make themselves aggressive for fighting." Commander Sullivan checked his weapon. It was still there, but he noticed more Zephyrian guards in the corridors. "They're increasing security around us. I count at least 20 soldiers just on this level." Hayes looked tired. The talks were not going as planned, but he wouldn't give up. "We knew this would be difficult. They're testing us, trying to make us desperate enough to accept their demands. We stay calm and keep trying." Monica Stevens had been reviewing the trade proposals, but she shook her head. "Sir, they haven't even looked at our offers. I don't think they want to trade with us at all. This feels like something else." Dr. Foster was studying her notes from the meetings. "Paul's right about the chemicals. I've been watching Zaxthor's behavior. He's showing signs of combat preparation. His body language, the way he moves, even the colors in his eyes. He's getting ready for violence." That night, Wright's instruments detected much stronger levels of the combat chemicals. The Zephyrians were pumping more of them into the air. He woke the others. "We need to leave," he whispered. "These chemicals affect their brains, make them want to fight. They've been breathing this for days. They're not going to negotiate. They're going to attack." Sullivan was already putting on his armor. "I'll try to get us to the ship. Stay close and move fast." But when they opened their door, Zephyrian soldiers were waiting. The aliens were fully armed with energy weapons and long blades that gleamed in the crystal light. Their eyes were bright red now, and they were making aggressive clicking sounds. "By order of High Executor Zaxthor," one soldier said through his translator, "the humans will return to their quarters and wait for judgment." Hayes stepped forward. "There's been a misunderstanding. We're here under diplomatic protection. You can't treat ambassadors this way." The soldier's weapon hummed with power. "You are not ambassadors. You are examples. Return to your rooms or be removed." They had no choice. Back in their quarters, Sullivan found that their communication devices had been disabled. The Zephyrians had cut them off from their ship and from Earth. "This was planned from the beginning," Foster said quietly. "They never wanted peace. They wanted to show their people and ours that humans can be killed easily. Hayes sat down heavily. For the first time, he looked old. I should have seen this coming. 30 years of making peace, and I walked us into a trap. Monica put her hand on his shoulder. You believe the best about them. That's not wrong, sir. That's what makes us human. Wright was still monitoring the air. The combat chemicals are at maximum levels now. Every Zephyrian in this station is ready for battle. Whatever they're planning, it's going to happen soon. They didn't have to wait long. An hour later, the door exploded inward. Zephyrian shock troops poured into the room, their weapons firing. The energy beams burned through walls and furniture like they were made of paper. Hayes threw himself in front of Linda Parker, his young aide, as a beam cut toward her. The energy tore through his chest, but he stayed standing long enough for her to reach her small emergency transmitter. Tell Earth. He gasped as he fell. Tell them we tried. Linda's fingers flew over the transmitter, sending a message toward human space. She got out 3 words. They never wanted. Before a Zephyrian blade cut her down. Dr. Foster ran toward the corridor, hoping to reach the ship. She made it halfway before energy beams crossed in front of her. She fell next to a wall covered with beautiful alien art, her blood mixing with the crystal light. Sullivan fought back with his sidearm, but human weapons weren't meant for creatures with natural armor. He killed 2 Zephyrians before they overwhelmed him. His last act was to upload all their recordings of Zephyrian military capabilities to an automatic beacon. Remember us, he said into his communicator, before a blade found his heart. Wright tried to hide. In the ship's laboratory, but there was nowhere to go. The Zephyrians cut through the ship's hull like it was made of cloth. As they found him, he was still taking readings, still trying to understand them even as they killed him. Monica made it to an escape pod and almost launched it. The pod's engines fired, lifting it away from the station. For a moment, it looked like one human would survive to tell Earth what happened. Then Zephyrian fighters appeared, their weapons glowing. The pod became a brief flash of light against the stars. The New Horizon lasted longer than its crew. Captain Martinez and her bridge team fought bravely, but their ship wasn't built for war. It was a vessel of peace carrying people who believed in talking instead of fighting. The Zephyrians tore it apart piece by piece, broadcasting the destruction across their empire. High Executor Zaxthor watched from his throne as the last pieces of the human ship burned in space. He was pleased. The soft flesh species would receive the message and understand their place in the galaxy. Send the recordings to their colonies, he ordered. Let them see what happens to those who think they can stand as equals to the Zephyrian Empire. They will surrender their worlds to avoid this fate. But Zaxthor had made a terrible mistake. He thought the massacre would terrify humans into submission. He didn't understand that humans had 2 faces. One face was peaceful, diplomatic, always hoping for the best in others. That was the face he had just destroyed. The other face was something much older and more dangerous. It was the face of a species that had climbed to the top of Earth's food chain by never giving up, never backing down, and never forgetting those who hurt their families. The emergency beacon from Commander Sullivan's last transmission traveled through space, carrying its message toward Earth. It would take 3 days to arrive. When it did, humanity would learn that their diplomats were dead, killed while trying to make peace. That would be the moment when Earth's fury finally awoke. The Zephyrians had wanted to send a message to humanity. They would get their reply, but it wouldn't be the surrender they expected. The beacon raced through the darkness between stars, carrying news that would change the galaxy forever. Behind it, Zephyrian ships prepared to attack human colonies, confident that their show of strength had broken human will. They would learn how wrong they were. But by then, it would be far too late to take back what they had done. The massacre of the New Horizon would be remembered, and the price for that memory would be paid in full. The emergency beacon reached Earth's outer monitoring stations 3 days after the massacre. The signal was weak and broken, but the message was clear enough. The New Horizon was gone. The diplomatic team was dead. The peace mission had failed in the worst possible way. Admiral Tony Garcia was sleeping when his aide woke him. The young officer's face was pale as he handed over the decoded message. Garcia read it twice, his hands growing steady as the reality sunk in. "Get me President Walsh," he said quietly. "Wake up everyone on the Earth Council. And send word to every colony, every ship, every human settlement in space. They need to know what happened." Within hours, the footage from Commander Sullivan's final transmission was playing on screens across human space. The images were terrible. Bodies in diplomatic uniforms. The New Horizon burning. Zephyrian soldiers celebrating over the wreckage. President Karen Walsh stood before the Earth Council in the emergency session. She was a small woman, but her voice carried across the chamber into every human world. "They invited our people to talk," she said, her words clear and cold. "They promised safe passage for diplomats under the protection of galactic law. Then they butchered them like animals and sent us the recordings." The chamber was silent except for the soft sound of people crying. These were leaders who had spent their lives building a peaceful civilization among the stars. Now they watched their best people die for trying to prevent a war. Admiral Garcia stood up from his seat. He was a big man with gray hair and old scars from the colony wars. His voice was rough with emotion. "Madam President, the Zephyrian Empire has made their intentions clear. This wasn't just murder. It was a declaration of war against every human being alive. They want us to surrender our colonies and accept slavery. I recommend we give them our answer." Across human space, the response was immediate and overwhelming. At Luna Station, Admiral Garcia watched his officers line up to volunteer for what everyone knew would be a suicide mission. These were people who had families, comfortable lives, promising careers, but they all volunteered. Chief Engineer Betty Cross had been working on peaceful projects for 20 years. Now she stood in the massive construction yards of Luna Station, converting civilian ships into instruments of war. Mining vessels became carriers for fighter craft. Cargo haulers were fitted with missile launchers. Even passenger liners were given armor and weapons. "We're not building warships," she told her teams as they worked around the clock. "We're building revenge." Dr. Henry Kim emerged from his secret laboratory carrying designs that hadn't seen light for decades. Military projects that peaceful humanity had locked away were suddenly priority one. Adaptive armor that learned from enemy weapons. Quantum torpedoes that could track targets across light years. Boarding pods designed to cut through any hull. But the most disturbing project was the Reaper drones. Kim had developed them using brain scans from the murdered diplomats. The artificial intelligence systems had the personalities and memories of Ambassador Hayes, Dr. Foster, and the others. They would pilot unmanned fighters, seeking vengeance with inhuman precision. "The dead will fight alongside the living," Kim explained to Admiral Garcia. "They'll remember every face, every voice, every moment of their murder. And they'll make the Zephyrians pay for each one." The response wasn't limited to Earth's military. On Mars, mining companies donated their entire fleets. The asteroid miners of the belt volunteered to retrofit their ships with ramming prows and explosive charges. Even the peaceful farming colonies sent their transport vessels to join the growing armada. Colonel Steve Rogers had fought in the Mars colony wars, the only real combat experience humanity had. He was chosen to lead the ground assault teams, soldiers who would board enemy stations and planets. He addressed his volunteers in the training centers of Luna. "We're not fighting for territory," he told them. "We're not fighting for resources or politics. We're fighting because someone thought they could erase us without consequences. Every Zephyrian who supported this massacre will learn that humanity remembers its dead." The fleet that assembled at Luna Station was unlike anything humans had ever built. The ships weren't the clean, elegant vessels of peacetime. They were rough, angry-looking craft covered in weapons and armor. Their names reflected their purpose: Retribution, Vengeance, Remember the New Horizon, Ambassador's Wrath. The largest ship was the new dreadnought Fury Unleashed, Admiral Garcia's flagship. It had been built in secret over 5 years as humanity's ultimate defensive weapon. Now it would carry the war to the enemy. President Walsh visited the fleet before it departed. She walked through the corridors where young people prepared for a war they had never wanted. Many of them would never come home, and they all knew it. "My fellow humans," she said over the ship's communication system, "we did not choose this path. We asked for peace and were given death. But from that death comes a promise that will echo across the galaxy. Humanity protects its own. We remember our fallen, and we make our enemies remember why they should have chosen differently." The fleet's departure was broadcast to every human world. Millions of people watched as nearly 300 ships formed up and jumped to hyperspace. They carried humanity's finest weapons, its bravest soldiers, and its burning need for justice. But they also carried something else. In the ship's memory banks were the complete recordings of the massacre. Every human would see how their diplomats died. They would remember Ambassador Hayes throwing himself in front of Linda Parker. They would see Dr. Foster falling as she tried to reach safety. They would watch Commander Sullivan uploading vital intelligence even as he died. The Zephyrian Empire had wanted to terrorize humanity into submission. Instead, they had awakened something that had slept since humans first learned to make war. They had reminded a peaceful species that survival sometimes required violence. As the fleet traveled toward Zephyrian space, Admiral Garcia sat in his command chair aboard the Fury Unleashed. Around him, officers who had once planned trade routes now calculated firing solutions. Engineers who had built schools and hospitals worked on weapons of unprecedented destruction. "Sir," his communications officer said, "we're receiving volunteer reports from across human space. Another 50 ships want to join us. The civilian population is demanding to help however they can." Garcia nodded. "Tell them to stay ready. If we fail, they'll need to defend Earth itself. But also tell them this. By the time we're finished, the Zephyrians will remember why it's dangerous to make humans angry." The fleet raced through hyperspace toward their first target, the frontier system of Kethvar. It was heavily defended by Zephyrian forces who were confident in their superiority. They had never fought humans before. They had only murdered diplomats. They were about to learn the difference between killing defenseless people and fighting a species that had clawed its way to the top of one planet and was ready to do the same across the galaxy. Earth's fury was awake now, and it was coming for them with everything humanity could build, everything it could fight with, and everything it could sacrifice. The Zephyrians had wanted to send a message. They were about to receive humanity's reply. 6 months after the massacre, the Zephyrian Empire received a transmission on all frequencies. It came from the edge of their frontier system, Kethvar. The message was simple and spoke in perfect Zephyrian. "You wanted to send a message?" said the human voice. "Message received. Here is our reply." Admiral Tony Garcia spoke from the bridge of the Fury Unleashed as the human fleet emerged from hyperspace. Behind him, nearly 300 ships formed perfect battle lines. They weren't the elegant vessels. The Zephyrians remembered from their encounter with the New Horizon. These were instruments of war, covered in weapons and scarred from hasty construction. The Zephyrian defenders of Kethvar were initially confident. Their sensors showed the human fleet approaching their 800 defending ships. High Commander Kolseth, leader of the system's defenses, made a clicking sound that meant amusement. "Only 300 ships," he told his subordinates. "The soft flesh species sends their children to die. We will destroy them quickly and send pieces back to their homeworld." But as the human fleet drew closer, the Zephyrian confidence began to fade. Their sensors couldn't understand what they were seeing. The human ships were moving in ways that seemed impossible, changing direction without showing engine burns. Their hulls were covered in materials that seemed to shift and adapt. "Unknown armor composition," reported the Zephyrian sensor officer. "Their hull plating is changing structure as we scan it." High Commander Kolseth didn't worry yet. "No matter. Our weapons will burn through any armor. Begin the attack. Show these humans the price of challenging us." The Zephyrian fleet opened fire first. Hundreds of energy beams and plasma missiles streaked toward the human ships. But something was wrong. The human vessels weren't trying to dodge. Instead, they seemed to be letting themselves get hit. Captain Roy Jenkins commanded the human cruiser Ambassador's Wrath. His ship took 17 direct hits in the first exchange. On any normal vessel, that would have meant destruction. Instead, Jenkins watched his tactical displays with satisfaction. "Adaptive armor is learning," reported his engineer. "Each hit makes us stronger against the next one. We're ready to return fire." "Good," Jenkins said. "Open a channel to the Zephyrian fleet." When the connection was established, his voice carried across space. "This is for Ambassador Richard Hayes." The Ambassador's Wrath fired its quantum torpedo array. The weapons moved faster than anything the Zephyrians had ever seen, punching through their shields like they weren't there. 3 enemy ships died in the first volley. Across the battlefield, human ships began their counterattack. Each captain broadcast the name of a murdered diplomat as they fired. For Dr. Amanda Foster. For Dr. Paul Wright. For Monica Stevens. For Commander Jake Sullivan. The Zephyrians quickly realized they weren't fighting the same humans they had massacred. These ships moved like angry hornets, swarming around larger enemy vessels. Their weapons seemed to know exactly where to strike for maximum damage. High Commander Kolseth watched his formations crumble. "What are those small craft?" he demanded, as strange fighters swept through his lines. "Unknown design," his tactical officer replied. "They're too fast for our weapons to track, and their attack patterns. They're not random. It's like they know our ship's weak points already." The small fighters were Dr. Kim's Reaper drones, piloted by artificial intelligences built from the brain patterns of the murdered diplomats. They fought with inhuman precision, striking exactly where Zephyrian ships were most vulnerable. The personality of Commander Sullivan directed boarding actions while Dr. Foster's AI coordinated defensive patterns. Captain Lisa Martinez, who had survived the massacre by being aboard a support ship, now commanded the carrier New Horizons Revenge. Her ship launched wave after wave of the Reaper drones while she spoke to the artificial intelligence of Ambassador Hayes. "How does it feel?" she asked the AI. "Getting to fight back?" The synthesized voice of Hayes replied through the ship's speakers. "We remember everything, every moment of our deaths, every Zephyrian face we saw. Justice feels appropriate." The space battle became a rout. Human ships tore through Zephyrian formations with weapons the aliens had never encountered. Boarding. Pods shaped like metal spears punched through enemy hulls, carrying Colonel Rogers and his assault teams into the heart of Zephyrian vessels. The human soldiers fought with a fury that terrified their enemies. They had watched the recordings of the massacre over and over. They knew the faces of every diplomat who died. Each Zephyrian they killed was payment for that debt. Rogers himself led the assault on High Commander Kolseth's flagship. The Zephyrian commander tried to surrender when human troops reached his bridge, but Rogers had specific orders. "You showed our diplomats mercy," he told Kolseth as his soldiers raised their weapons. "You get the same amount we received." The system fell in 18 hours. As Zephyrian survivors fled in whatever ships could still fly, they carried footage of human soldiers carving memorial names into the stations they had captured. The message was clear. Humanity remembered its dead, and the living would pay that debt. But the humans weren't finished. Admiral Garcia's fleet split into smaller groups, each targeting different parts of the Zephyrian Empire. They moved like a plague, destroying everything military they found. Planets that surrendered were left alone. Those that resisted were conquered. The Zephyrian High Command watched their empire burn from their capital world. High Executor Zaxthor, who had ordered the massacre, found himself facing rebellions across his territory. Species that had been enslaved by the Zephyrians saw human broadcasts promising freedom to all who renounced genocide. "The humans are destroying everything we built," his advisor told him. 12 systems have already fallen. Our fleet losses are catastrophic. Zaxthor's multifaceted eyes reflected the lights of his throne room. How can soft flesh beings fight? Like this, they were supposed to be weak, peaceful creatures. "They were peaceful," the advisor replied, "until we taught them to be otherwise." The human fleet grew stronger with each victory. Freed alien species provided ships and soldiers. Human technology improved as they captured Zephyrian equipment and learned from it. Chief Engineer Betty Cross worked around the clock, incorporating enemy innovations into human weapons. "Every ship we capture makes us smarter," she reported to Admiral Garcia. "We're learning their techniques and making them better. By the time we reach their homeworld, we'll be unstoppable." The war continued for 2 years. Human forces pressed deeper into Zephyrian space, planting memorial gardens on every world they liberated. The names of Ambassador Hayes and his team became legend among the freed species. Children who had never seen Earth learned to speak those names with reverence. The Zephyrian Empire, which had controlled 12 star systems for centuries, crumbled under the human assault. Their member species rebelled, their military defected, their trade routes were cut. What had once been a mighty civilization became a collection of desperate holdouts. And at the center of it all was Zeph Prime, the Zephyrian homeworld, where High Executor Zaxthor waited in his crystal palace. He had started the war by ordering the murder of human diplomats. Now he would face the consequences of that choice. Admiral Garcia's fleet gathered at the edge of the Zeph system. 300 human ships had become nearly 1,000, joined by allies from across the former empire. They surrounded the homeworld of the species that had thought humans were too weak to fight back. "This is Admiral Garcia to High Executor Zaxthor," came the transmission to the planet below. "You killed our diplomats while they tried to make peace. You broadcast their deaths to terrorize us. We received your message. Now you get ours." The final battle for Zeph Prime was about to begin. The species that had awakened Earth's fury would finally meet the full force of humanity's revenge. And somewhere in the growing fleet, the AI personalities of the murdered diplomats prepared for their moment of ultimate justice. The final battle began at dawn on Zeph Prime. Admiral Garcia's fleet descended through the planet's atmosphere like falling stars. Nearly 1,000 ships darkened the sky above the Zephyrian capital city. Their weapons trained on the Crystal Palace where High Executor Zaxthor had ruled his empire. The palace defenses opened fire, but human technology had evolved far beyond what it was 2 years ago. The energy beams that would have destroyed the New Horizon bounced harmlessly off adaptive armor. Missiles that had terrorized other species were intercepted by point defense systems built from captured Zephyrian technology. Colonel Steve Rogers led the ground assault personally. His troops landed in the palace courtyard, their drop pods smashing through crystal walls and decorative gardens. These weren't the peaceful diplomats the Zephyrians had murdered. These were soldiers who had fought across the galaxy for 2 years, gaining experience and anger with every battle. "Remember why we're here," Rogers told his men over the radio as they advanced through the palace corridors. "Every step we take is for the people who came here in peace and died for trying." The Zephyrian palace guards fought desperately, but they were defending a building designed for beauty, not war. Human soldiers moved through rooms filled with alien art and precious crystals, following scanner readings toward the throne room where Zaxthor waited. High above, Admiral Garcia coordinated the attack from the bridge of the Fury Unleashed. Around him, the artificial intelligences of the murdered diplomats appeared on display screens, their synthesized faces watching the battle unfold. "We should have been the ones to do this," said the AI version of Commander Sullivan. "We should have been the ones to make him pay." "You are," Garcia replied. "Every shot we fire, every step we take is guided by what you learned during those final days. Your sacrifice gave us the intelligence to win this war." Dr. Foster's AI added quietly, "We died believing in peace, but sometimes peace can only come after justice is served." Inside the palace, Rogers and his team reached the throne room. The massive chamber was exactly as the human diplomats had described it before they died. The ceiling disappeared into shadows. The black crystal throne dominated the room. And on that throne sat High Executor Zaxthor, the being who had ordered their deaths. The Zephyrian ruler was alone except for a handful of guards. His empire was gone, his fleets destroyed, his people scattered or dead, but his multifaceted eyes still burned with defiance as the human soldiers entered his throne room. "So," Zaxthor said, his voice echoing through speakers, "the soft-fleshed species comes to claim their revenge. Do you think this makes you strong? Do you think victory in war proves you are worthy?" Rogers walked slowly up the steps toward the throne. His weapon was ready, but he wasn't in a hurry. "You want to know what makes us strong? We sent diplomats first. We tried to talk. We believed the best about you even when you showed us the worst. And what did that weakness gain you?" Zaxthor demanded. "Your diplomats died like insects. Their peace meant nothing." "Their peace meant everything," Rogers replied. "It showed the galaxy who we really are. When beings choose to talk instead of fight, when they risk their lives for peace, that takes more courage than any warrior has." The colonel raised his weapon. "But you taught us something else. You showed us that some beings only understand violence, so we learned to speak your language." Zaxthor leaned forward on his throne. "You think you have won? You think destroying my empire changes anything? War's all there is in this galaxy. You have become like us now. You are no longer the peaceful species you pretended to be." Rogers shook his head. "That's where you're wrong. We're still the same people who sent diplomats first. We still believe in peace and talking instead of fighting, but we also believe in protecting the innocent and punishing those who hurt them." He activated the charges his team had placed around the throne room. "This isn't about becoming like you. This is about making sure no one else has to die the way our people did. The explosion was visible from orbit. The Crystal Palace, symbol of Zephyrian power for centuries, collapsed into glowing fragments. High Executor Zaxthor, who had ordered the massacre of humanity's finest diplomats, died in the ruins of his throne room. But Rogers had made sure he wasn't alone. Before the charges detonated, he had activated a holographic projector. In Zaxthor's final moments, he saw the faces of every human diplomat he had ordered killed. Ambassador Hayes, Dr. Foster, Dr. Wright, Monica Stevens, Commander Sullivan, Linda Parker, and all the others. They watched him die with the same expressions they had worn while trying to make peace. The war was over. Across the former Zephyrian Empire, human forces accepted the surrender of remaining military units. Some chose to fight to the death rather than face human justice. Others laid down their weapons and begged for the mercy their leaders had refused to show. Admiral Garcia stood on the bridge of his flagship as reports came in from across the galaxy. The Zephyrian Empire was gone. 12 star systems were free from tyranny. Dozens of enslaved species were liberated, and humanity had proven that peaceful beings could fight when they had to. Admiral, his communications officer, reported, "We're receiving messages from Earth. President Walsh wants to know when the fleet will return home." Garcia looked out at the stars that had been darkened by war for 2 years. "Tell the president we'll come home when we're finished here. We have memorials to build and friends to help rebuild their worlds." 3 years after the massacre on the New Horizon, a ceremony was held on Luna Station. President Walsh, now bearing the scars of leading humanity through its first galactic war, spoke to representatives from dozens of species. These were beings who had been slaves under Zephyrian rule but were now free allies of Earth. "We did not choose this war," Walsh said, her words carried across human space and beyond. "We asked for peace and were given death. But from that death came a lesson that will echo across the galaxy. Humanity protects its own. We remember our fallen. We honor our friends, and we make our enemies remember why they should have chosen differently." The memorial wall behind her bore the names of every human who had died in the war. At the top, carved in letters that caught the light, were the names of the diplomats who had started it all. Ambassador Richard Hayes, Dr. Amanda Foster, Dr. Paul Wright, Monica Stevens, Commander Jake Sullivan, Linda Parker, and Captain Lisa Martinez. Admiral Garcia, now bearing scars from a dozen battles, spoke last. His hair was completely gray and his eyes held the weight of command decisions that had shaped the galaxy. "They thought they were predators, and we were prey," he said quietly. "They learned the truth too late. Humans aren't prey or predators. We're something far more dangerous. We're survivors who remember." Around the memorial, children from a dozen worlds played in gardens planted with flowers from Earth. They spoke different languages and had different shapes, but they all knew the names on the wall. They had learned that peace was precious because good people had died trying to protect it. The ceremony concluded with a moment of silence for all who had died in the war. In that silence, humanity remembered not just its losses, but what it had learned about itself. They were still a peaceful species. They still preferred talking to fighting. They still believed in diplomacy and cooperation. But they had also learned that when talking failed, when peace was impossible, when innocent people were threatened, humanity could fight with a fury that shook the galaxy. They could adapt, overcome, and win against any enemy that chose to threaten what they protected. The Zephyrian Empire was gone, remembered only in history books and cautionary tales. The species that had thought humans were weak, soft-flesh beings existed only in scattered refugee populations, living reminders of what happened to those who mistook peaceful intentions for weakness. And in the depths of space, where the New Horizon had burned, a beacon still transmitted the final message from Commander Sullivan. It spoke to any ship that passed by, human or alien, carrying its simple warning across the stars. They never wanted peace. "Tell Earth to remember us." Earth had remembered. The galaxy would never forget the price of making humanity angry. And somewhere among the stars, the children of a dozen liberated worlds played in gardens planted with earth flowers, protected by the knowledge that some beings would fight and die to defend peace itself. The war was over. Earth's fury had served its purpose. But the lesson would endure for generations across the galaxy. Humanity was not to be underestimated, their diplomats were not to be harmed, and their memory was very, very long.